start over. Well, thank you again, Joanne, for joining us for April's Fun Friday event. So this theme is obviously focused on what we can do to help support Mother Earth. So I appreciate you joining us and talking to us about recycling. Before we get started on the topic, can you give us a little bit of background of who you are and how you came to be in this role?
Sure, but first I just want to say my name is Joanne Gemendit, and happy Earth Month to everybody. Currently, I'm the executive director of the New Jersey Clean Communities Council, and we're going to learn a little bit more about what we do statewide. But I spent 35 years as Union County's recycling coordinator, so I think we have a lot to talk about today, and we're going to learn how to recycle wherever you live in Union County.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Before we get started, can you tell us a little bit about what happens to our recycling and our trash and where it goes? And, how long have we, New Jersey, had this as a standard practice? Because I know not all states do.
That's a great segue into this discussion. And most people, students and teachers alike, don't realize that New Jersey was the first state to actually mandate recycling. And recycling started and the law was passed in 1987. So we're almost 35 years in. So we really need to learn how to do a better job. Because just like everything else, recycling laws change. What can be recycled is dictated by our end markets. So it's important to learn the rules as you go. But most importantly, you need to learn before we talk about recycling where our garbage goes, because most people just put it at the curb and don't think about where it goes after that. Union County is very unique in that we don't have a landfill. We actually have what we call the resource recovery facility. So all garbage, it's called type 10 garbage in Union County, goes to this facility. It's located in Rahway. It looks like a giant cigarette when it's all lit up. That's what my son used to call it when he was little. When we would drive by, Ma, there's the giant cigarette. But it actually burns all of our garbage, and it has filters at the top to take out any toxic materials. And then it actually produces electricity. So we actually generate electricity that turns on the lights in your home from burning our garbage. And there's only 5 counties in New Jersey that operate or take their garbage to a resource recovery facility. Everyone else has landfills.
That's really cool. I actually didn't know that.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So the other thing that I think for me, as even an adult, that I find confusing is, we have so many different plastics, different materials. I feel like I might overly recycle and probably put some incorrect things. So can you talk a little bit about, just what should we recycle, what isn't recyclable, and help clarify that?
Yeah, that's a big question, and there's a lot of moving parts to that answer. But I'm going to try to simplify it because this is a really important topic because a lot of our end markets overseas have closed. So things that we used to be able to recycle, or we had end markets, which means people took that material and made something else out of it. They're not available to the extent that they were even 3 years ago. So it's time to re-educate not just our kids, but our parents, and hopefully we're all going to learn a little something today. So this is what's mandated for Union County, and it's actually a pretty short list. But what you've referred to before, we call wishful recycling. People go out to a store and they buy a salad in a plastic container. It's empty, and they say, "Oh, this is plastic. It should be recyclable." I'm going to put it in my recycling container. And that's actually not recyclable. You'll note here it says plastic bottles and containers coated with number 1 and number 2. And we're going to go through that in 1 minute, what specifically that entails. We also take mixed paper, cans, aluminum and steel cans, glass bottles and jars, cardboard and cartons. That's a pretty small list when you think about all the items that you bring home and use, especially today with COVID and just everyone's on the go and going through the drive-through. So going back to the plastic bottles, if I can, number 1 and number 2, what are they? So number 1 is actually what we call polyethylene. So it's your basic plastic water bottle. That's what you use every day when you're playing sports or you're going out, you grab a bottle of water. The number 2 plastic is your milk jugs. That's basically the only types of plastic that are recyclable in our recycling stream right now.
That's pretty limiting. I'm surprised. And of course, I had a salad. So this is a perfect example today. And I actually think I need to dig the plastic container out of my recycling bin. So is it because of the type of plastic, or is it because there's food in it? Both?
It has nothing to do with the food because everything has, even your milk or milk containers have food in it. It has to do with the type of plastic. There's a whole science behind it, and it's a big myth because all plastics are made with a recycling symbol on the bottom.
Right.
And there's plastics 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is styrofoam, and 7. So 1 through 7. But the manufacturers of plastic put the numbers on there to help identify what kind of plastic it was, not to really dictate whether it's recyclable. The other material that some towns do take, I don't want to misguide you and say not all of them are recyclable. Number 5 is also recyclable. The problem when educating people is if I tell you, oh, number 5s are good to go in your container, people are going to say, well, what's a number 5? Because it's not something just people commonly know. I can tell you that it's like a sour cream container or a yogurt container. So as long as we have the sorting or optical eyes to see them, and we're going to show you some examples of what that means going forward, that's what's considered recyclable. But number 1 and number 2 are the only ones that are mandated, which means you don't have a choice. Any town that's in Union County has to, by law, collect those 2 plastics in their curbside recycling container. They can take more, but they can't take less than that.
Okay, that's great information. So what about the caps?
Oh, that's a great question. This is what I tell people. Take the lids off and throw them away. The reason behind Union County's answer, okay, because I am speaking for the county, is it makes sure that the containers are empty and dry, because a lot of people will take a half container or a soda bottle and throw it away. We don't want that. But this is really important to know. If your container is empty and your lid is on it, that's perfectly okay. But we wanted to give people an answer, yes or no. So the answer is no, solely because we want the containers free of liquids. And the other note is don't crush them. Which a lot of people think they're making room in their bin and making them smaller. But when we talk about the optical eye, because these are sorted by robots, The smaller you make them, the harder it is for the robots to see. So we need the containers to have a little volume to be able to identify them by the robots.
That's interesting. I also didn't know this. I feel like I'm learning a ton because I was going to ask that question. So we had since moved. So we live in Clark, and basically the instruction is you can put like all your recyclables in one container, and that just seems so cumbersome. So it's all robots.
Not all. There's a combination, and I'm not sure what my slide is next, but we're going to go there. Talking about where all your stuff goes, that was a perfect question. There's single stream and dual stream recycling. You live in a town that has single stream. We have 14 towns in Union County that are single stream and 7 that are dual stream. The big difference is in dual stream, your paper and cardboard is kept separate from your bottles and cans and glass. You single stream, everything goes together. The big problem with single stream is it's one big container, and people tend to throw a lot of stuff in that container that isn't recyclable, and that they kind of know isn't recyclable. But because most single stream towns, they have the what we call the one-armed bandit truck that comes to pick it up. There's no men involved. Dual stream, there's usually men on the back of trucks picking up your recycling, where single stream, it's usually done by the truck itself. So people aren't visually inspecting your load. So they tend to throw a lot of stuff in there that maybe they can't get rid of from their garbage. So once the truck comes, whether it's dual stream or single stream, they bring it to what we call a MRF. It's a materials recycling facility. And this is what it looks like. All the material gets dumped on a floor, and then it goes up on conveyor belts. Believe it or not, the beginning part is all sorted out by hand. And it requires a lot of manpower and a lot of time, because to weed out the stuff that obviously isn't recyclable. But once it passes the first, 10 people, it goes, as you can see, down the line. And it's all done there's a lot of science behind it, but the heavier stuff gets shifted out. If you ever see a video of it, it gets shifted and it goes through a whole bunch of different layers, and it gets sorted into different products. You have your recycling in one, your aluminum and steel cans are done separately, and this is how it's all compacted into bales. That's what we call a bale. And believe it or not, you'll see here that there's a light shining on it. And this was at Waste Management's facility in Newark, and this was actually from a Union County load. It's really, really important because the cost of recycling has gone up, to make sure that the bales are not contaminated with material that's not actually what's supposed to be in it. So that's why the lights are on here. There are employees that actually go and physically inspect the loads and pull out material that they can tell isn't what's supposed to be in it. The stuff is shipped overseas quite often, and if it arrives in port, and they can see that it's contaminated, they'll reject the load and send it back, which costs hundreds of thousands of dollars, believe it or not.
Wow.
I know that was a lot. That was a long explanation, but that's
That's
pretty
okay.
much how it's done.
So the one question that I have, so I always collect my recyclables in a bag, mainly to protect like my trash can that I put it in. So what's the issue with bags?
Okay, you can put them in bags in your kitchen, in your home, but the number one rule that we don't want in the recycling is plastic bags. And this is why. Actually, this was, before I go on to the picture, this was our big campaign that we did in 2018, 19, and 20, telling people, please don't put your bags in the recycling. And this is what happens.
Oh my
We
God.
talked before about the robots and how it goes through the line. This is a picture straight from a recycling facility, and this is what happens to the bags. It actually gets wound around all they call recycling screens, and the facility actually has to shut down a couple times a day.
Mhm.
Men have to go in there and cut the bags off. If you're anybody that vacuums in their house, it's the same thing like a vacuum. If you have long hair, it gets tied around the vacuum and gets stuck and you have to clean it out. But this is done every day.
Oh my
So
goodness.
no bags in the recycling.
Yeah, definitely. So I know you talked about the cost of contamination with rejection, especially when you ship it overseas. Um, aside, why are they so stickler-ish over contamination? Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, a lot of it has to do with the garbage. We're basically, when you put something in your recycling that's not recyclable, you're basically giving someone your garbage.
Mhm.
I don't want anyone else's garbage. And it costs a lot of money. Why would, not only do other countries not want our garbage, why would we want to spend all that extra money to ship it? Because they can't afford to ship it back and then they have to deal with it. We have a lot more facilities, whether it be a landfill or a waste to energy facility in New Jersey and in the States to be able to handle that. But contamination, a little bit of contamination from your house, and I'm not putting you on the spot. If you take a load of recycling from your house and mix it in with the whole block, it then contaminates the whole truck full of stuff. And it just costs a lot more money to take it out. There's also one of the biggest problems we're dealing with now is batteries. That's a whole nother class in and of itself. But lithium ion batteries, which are in your phone, and they're the most popular rechargeable battery in America, they're a fire hazard. And I say that not to scare anybody, but to educate, and it is a little alarming. You definitely don't want to put them in your recycling container. We've had five major fires and recycling facilities burned down to the ground in New Jersey in the last year.
Oh,
Every single fire has been from a lithium ion battery. I don't know about you, but I get a little bit of a chill just saying that. Um, so lithium ion batteries you can bring when you go to Home Depot or Best Buy. There's bins right when you walk in. That's where you should bring them. They're all sealed and lined to handle those kind of batteries. So if you learn, one thing you really need to learn is all about lithium ion batteries. Your regular AA and AAA batteries that you put in your Xbox that are not rechargeable can be thrown away. But if it's rechargeable, it's recyclable.
okay, good to know. I travel a lot, and they always ask if I have any batteries in my checked luggage.
And that's
So
why.
this also that would be problematic on planes too. That
Absolutely. There's been, fires on planes, from that. Same thing with like UPS trucks.
mm,
There's a whole different shipping concern when it comes to just anything with batteries in it. My mom sent my aunt an old phone of hers. I said, did you take the battery out? She goes, oh no, that way she has the battery. And, I think, like I said, it's an educational um, hill that we climb. So
great. So I think that you have after this some questions on should you or should you not recycle,
yeah, so now that you learned the very short list of what
like
goes
a
into
game.
recycling, to recycling bin, and that's what we're going to talk about. There, There are many materials that are recyclable, but they don't go in your recycling container.
Mm.
Okay. And that's a huge lesson that everyone needs to learn, because it may take a little bit of effort on your part to get it recycled, but we're going to learn what is and what isn't. Um, so this is the generation of fast service. You want to drink? I make my own coffee at home, but I think I'm one of the few people in New Jersey that does that. So I think you kind of all know the answer to this. So I'm just going to lead you down the path of yes and no. This is not recyclable. I think we covered that already. And straws we're going to get to later. Straws are no good. We don't want them. Dirty napkins. They are definitely not recyclable. So they can go in the garbage, and they actually burn well, and they create more energy. So that's a good thing to add to your garbage. Um, Plastic containers, and these are everywhere. I
Mhm.
also generate plastic, but I do try to minimize, and because it is not recyclable, but you can reuse it. When I go out to dinner on the weekends, I always bring a container with me, so I don't take any more plastic or styrofoam home from the store with me. Speaking of styrofoam, is this recyclable? Most of you are going to say no. Here's a fun tidbit. If you live in Union County, Union County is home to the only styrofoam recycler in New Jersey. They're located in Springfield. The company name is Foam Pack, and they're right off of 22. So this material, if you can see my arrow, is recyclable. The hard foam is recyclable. We have 9 or 10 towns in Union County that collect it, but Foam Pack will take it from any resident in Union County, and they're open 24/7. They have a bin in their parking lot. The little tiny peanuts are not recyclable from there, but you can bring them back to a UPS store or something like that, and they'll reuse them. But they're not as common as they used to be.
Mm.
Batteries, we already answered that question, so I'm going to skip over that for now. Magazines, obviously, they're a big part of paper, the paper product, mixed paper. This also includes your mail, newspaper, all that kind of stuff is recyclable through your curbside program. Aluminum foil.
Mm.
Most people are going to take aluminum foil and throw it away. I've made the mistake in the past. After a party, I clean out all my aluminum foil. It's not really a good a recyclable item, because it doesn't get through all those screens that we looked at before. Remember, there's magnets involved in the process, and it's not sorted very well. So unfortunately, we're going to put that one in the garbage. Um, and I kind of confused you before when I talked about the 1 and 2,
Mhm.
and this is actually recyclable. You're going to see a number 1 or a number 2 on the bottom, and I'm going to give you a little inside scoop how to tell. It's not 100%, but it's it'll really help you out. If the top of the container, I don't know if you can see my arrow, is smaller than the bottom of the container, we're saying thumbs up, and that's recyclable. Okay, so that's a really good tool when, if you don't feel like looking at the container, if the top is smaller than the bottom, thumbs up, and it can go into the blue bin. Wrapping paper. This is an answer that the answer is it depends. I use craft paper, and a lot less, not the shiny stuff. And I put all of my wrapping paper at Christmas into a paper bag, and I put it out with my recycling. If it's shiny paper or you put it into a big garbage bag, that's going to go into the garbage, because once again, we don't want those plastic bags. Pizza boxes, not recyclable. Why? That all has to do with the oil at the bottom. I'm obviously a super grade A recycler, so I will take the tops of my pizza boxes off and recycle them in my cardboard with my cardboard. But if it's one or the other, yes or no, we're going no. And obviously, clothes are recyclable. And they have a value, even if they have a stain on them, even if they have a hole in them, they do have a value. So make sure you bring them to any number of bins that are, I'm sure, located. I know there's a couple in Clark right on Broadway or Walnut because I use them all the time.
We do a big
Um,
clothing drive too with the school,
oh,
so
that's
part of it.
perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we can, so definitely plug that whenever that is. I'll come as well. Um, we talk about glass. That's your glass jars. And this type of glass is actually not recyclable. If it's broken, it goes into your garbage, just like mirrors.
Mm.
That's not the type of glass that we recycle. And I threw the hose in here because you would be shocked at how many people throw their old hoses in with their recycling. And just like the bags that get caught up in the star screens, they have to go in and cut off many hoses. So don't throw your hose, even though it's plastic, into recycling. And last but not least, books. Books are not recyclable in your recycling bin. However, there are new places coming up that actually take books for recycling. We have two bins I know of in Scotch Plains on Terrell Road that actually you can bring your books. The only caveat is, or the only rule is, you have to have a barcode on it. As long as it has a barcode, it can be scanned. You can recycle your books.
Hmm.
So, to review really quickly, no plastic bags. That's the number one rule, but they are recyclable. When you go to ShopRite or Acme, there are containers there that you can bring your old or used plastic bags to, and they actually turn them into Trex decking or plastic benches or plastic pots. So they are recyclable, just not curbside. Same thing with styrofoam. Shredded paper is, once you shred it at home, it is not recyclable. It has to go in the garbage. And that's because it gets caught in, you can't, once you put it on a conveyor belt, the paper flies all over the place. So, and once again, it burns well, it makes a lot of electricity. So put that in your garbage. Um, I think that's all we have for on that right now. Although that's an answer to a question you haven't asked me yet.
So the one thing that I actually did want to ask, or just make a comment, not more of a question. I think that there's always a perception that putting things in a trash is bad and putting things in a recycling bin is good because you're trying to be mindful of it. But in actuality, just to your point on shredded paper, that's more energy efficient and friendly because it does get transitioned to energy. So that's completely different than, quite frankly, how I've approached this whole idea of, trash versus recycling.
Yeah, and it's not because we're trying to do something wrong. We're trying to do a good thing. And I have to say, some of the ownership on this has to go to the recycling facilities themselves, because when single stream recycling started, they gave the message, put it all in there and we'll sort it out. So that's what we're still listening to in our head. But because a lot of our overseas markets said we don't want all of this other stuff, is when they changed the message. And once you educate people the first time what to do, that's kind of what they hear. But going back to the contamination, that's the key. That's the message we're trying to tell people now is, don't throw, if it's not on that list, don't throw it out. When in doubt, throw it out. We actually have that in on our refuse garbage trucks that go around town to educate the drivers. Because you get a new driver in there and they go, oh, it's in the recycling. If one or two items are in the recycling that don't belong there, that whole load then has to go in the garbage. So it's really important that you keep them separate.
The last question that I have on recycling, and I know that we're going to transition a little bit to the plastic bag ban that's going to be coming our way. So when I was younger, the first time I was ever exposed to recycling was at my grandfather's house, and honestly, it was, God, I don't want to date myself, like late 80s, early 90s. So I mean, it was a while ago.
Sure.
And he used to rinse out every single container, and that was the instructions that they gave him to ensure that there wasn't contamination of food. But then it also seems counterintuitive because then you're using water. So you're
Correct.
replacing one natural resource with another. So,
Yeah.
is that necessary in order to be able to recycle?
And I even struggle, believe it or not, with that question. And when you do your annual purge of the refrigerator and you find things in the back and you go, oh, I don't think I want to open that.
Yeah.
Um, but that's the truth. So, I think it's a relevant part of the conversation. I will throw it away because in my mind, where that jar of salsa is going to end up full, or versus I'm gonna have to open it and see things I don't want to see. So I'll throw it away and sleep at night. It'll be okay.
Well, thank you for that question because I was curious what was right, and if I was shortchanging my recycling approach. um, so with respect to plastic bags, we talked a little bit about that and the avenue in which you can recycle them, and I actually didn't realize that they were transitioned into like Trex decking too, which is kind of cool to see how they're repurposed. I know that the governor just signed a law, right? That's going to transition us away from single-use bags. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's actually my new job. Um, and the governor on last November 4th, which was not that long ago, and the state legislature signed a law. The most strict law in the country, New Jersey again is rising to the top. And in 18 months from that date, which is May 4th of 2021, both plastic and paper bags are going to be banned at the grocery store, which is really overwhelming if you think about it. And plastic bags will also be banned at other retail locations, but they are allowed to use plastic as long as they're smaller than 2,500 square feet. So this a big message. We have, just about a year, starting I think next week. We're counting down a year until this goes in play in New Jersey.
So that's going to be a huge shift for me personally, for two reasons. I reuse my grocery bags for trash, for dog duties.
Yeah, common.
And honestly, and I know that this is something that I can do better with. I even have reusable bags, but the number of times I just forget them
And
is
that's
ridiculous. But I guess I'm gonna have to remember at some point.
well, and I can say, obviously, that's my job and that's something that's important to me. I have not gone to the grocery store without a usable bag in probably a year and a half. And that includes not just a grocery store, but the dollar store, Macy's, anywhere I go. It's just something because
Because
I've
we have it.
learned it's a learned behavior. But we need to do better. and to make sure that people on May 4th aren't walking into stores and saying, oh, I didn't know anything about it. So I'd love to talk about our new campaign. It's called Bag Up NJ. We actually just launched it last week. We just finalized our logo and our graphic, and it's all about making sure people bring a reusable grocery bag with them. And I'm going to say something really controversial, or just carry it. I don't want to say arguments, but conversations with people all the time. And I say, oh, I don't need a bag, I'll just carry it. Even at Wendy's, and they don't understand why I can just carry my salad to the car without a bag. I'm like, I have hands. That's what they're for.
It's
So,
so ingrained in our culture, I think, just to put
yes,
things in a bag and ease of use for carry out. And it is going to take a change in mindset and a huge shift. Even, I mean, I know I can do better, and I just continue to forget at some point, the rubber's going to hit the road
yeah.
on May 4th.
Well, hopefully you're going to see this Bag Up New Jersey campaign everywhere. We are going to be partnering with all the counties and the towns in New Jersey and going out and making sure we give out enough bags. One of the biggest challenges is going to be, when you shop from home and you go to pick up your,
Yeah.
you go to ShopRite in Clark, which has one of the biggest shop at home businesses in New Jersey, and trying not for them to figure out a way not to do bags. Whether they go to cardboard, I tell them all the time, just load it all in there, I'll bag it myself. But not everybody wants to do that, but you're not going to have a choice pretty soon. So I'm excited. It's a challenge to make sure everyone knows that, but I'm counting on the students at St. John's to make sure that their parents know. And when you go to 7-Eleven and grab a soda, don't get a bag with your chips. I mean, just carry it. You're good.
I feel like that's a good slogan or a tagline, like just carry
Just carry it.
it.
Oh, see, had I known that, maybe that could have been
Yeah,
our campaign.
exactly. Well, it's less effective if you're using reusable bags, so I
Yes.
guess. So it's a great campaign, and it's catchy, so it'll help people remember, hopefully.
Yeah.
So I think you have a little bit of statistics in terms of, because a bag is so small and they're so thin, what can that truly do to the environment? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. As an educator, these are kind of the statistics that I'm used to, looking up and telling other people. And that's probably why I haven't used one in a long time. But the average plastic bag is only used 12 minutes. That to me is daunting. Um, and really important, plastic doesn't ever go away. Uh, my son, I have a 25-year-old son who doesn't really like to go shopping with me because I get into these adamant conversations with, don't put it in a bag. And it wasn't until I explained to him this part. I said, a plastic bag that is littered, for example, it may decompose, but it just breaks down into smaller plastic. It doesn't ever go away, ever. Um, and because plastic bags now are so light and so flimsy, they barely make it. If you take one item out of the bag blows away, becomes litter, and it stays around forever. And they get trapped quite often when they go, down the sewer or into the ocean. They look like a jellyfish. You know how a jellyfish swims like that? They look just like that in the ocean. And a lot of animals, including turtles, will eat them. And it trust me when I tell you it's not a good thing, because it gets stuck in their intestine, and we lose a lot of animals every year to plastic bags and litter.
Hmm. Wow,
Yeah.
it's very sobering.
Sorry.
Well, I mean, it's good. It's good to understand the ripple effects because, to your point, the bags to me, honestly, like half the time they break before I bring them home.
Right.
So they just seem so flimsy, but I guess as they break down, it may look like food to birds and, other impacts. I remember, again, not to date myself, but when the campaign on the like the plastic that goes around 6-pack of cans were big, and how you needed to
Yes.
cut them up because they would get caught in wildlife's necks, but then you're almost creating a separate challenge with smaller pieces of plastic because it still goes to the same places.
Yeah,
Um,
I think the big thing is making sure that you don't litter. And I still cut them up. I don't buy soda often, but I did just buy a 6-pack of the seltzer water. And I had one of those things and I said, oh, I haven't done this in a long time. And I did cut it up and I put it in the garbage. I think that's the key fact, is to make sure that the stuff doesn't get littered, because then it goes down into that storm drain and it ends up in our rivers and our oceans.
I've seen a lot of in the past year, and it's not really around recycling, but it goes to the littering conversation with all of us having to wear masks, and
Oh,
people who are wearing gloves and just finding latex gloves on the ground, and you know having somebody's masks on the ground. And for me, I feel conflicted because I don't have gloves on me when I see this all the time. Like, I want to pick it up and clean up, but at the same time I work in healthcare, so if I see a mask or a glove on the ground, in my mind it's got other contamination associated with it. But it just goes back to trying to ensure that everything goes in its place.
oh, it was so alarming last year. It's not as bad now, which I think is a little helpful. But just everybody was wearing gloves and they didn't want to get in their car. But to just throw them on the ground, uh, I don't understand how anybody could do that, let alone a lot of people, because they were in every parking lot, all over the place. And Union County actually did a big campaign. We actually did a video, we did a PSA on not littering your PPE.
Yeah, it's important to be mindful of that.
Yeah, we did one other. Oh, here's some. Oh, we're going to segue into straws. I'm sorry.
I was just about
Um,
to ask you about
I'm
straws.
sorry. I thought I was going to talk about Union County's Reel In and Recycle program, but I guess that's later. Um, yeah, I'm just going to jump right into this. New Jersey's law that bans bags also is banning. Um, it's not banning straws. It's mandating that as of November 4th of this year, you actually have to request a straw. They don't just automatically give it to you. When you're going through a drive-through, or when you're going into Quick Check, or even at a restaurant, you have to ask for a straw, versus them just giving it to you, because that's another item that you use it once and it ends up, as it says here, it's a straw is manufactured in a minute. It's used for an average of 10, and it decomposes over a period of 100 years. That's a big question to ask next time you go to use a straw. Is like, do you really need it? Or
So
carry it home.
I actually didn't realize that straws weren't recyclable. I was putting them in the recyclables, and I learned that actually at Disney. So the Animal Kingdom has a really good program where it educates on just how you can be more mindful in recycling, and just kind of how you approach your decisions.
Right. And Union County just wants, so you don't have to make that decision. We just don't want to give it to you in the first place.
Great. So, with respect to the Union County programs, I think you had mentioned a little bit about some additional activities and opportunities to recycle there.
Yeah, well, we actually added a program. We have a lot of lakes in Union County, and a lot of fishing goes on, where we have a lot of fishermen, a lot of fishing derbies. And what happens is people will cast a line out, it may get stuck, and they just cut it and leave it there. What they don't realize is that entangles birds, turtles, fish, and even wildlife. So 2 years ago, in 2019, we created, there's a lot of these down the shore area, but Union County created their own version with an actual bird that wasn't tangled with fishing line. And we placed these in fishing areas all over Union County. And we actually collect the material and it is recycled into ecosystems for wildlife.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So the other end of recycling is reusing. So I'm going back to my childhood where my mother would wash out the Cool Whip containers because we really didn't have, reusable plastic containers that weren't like Tupperware, and that was high end at the time. So what more can we do to try to be mindful and potentially reuse?
Yeah.
Um,
And there's a reason that the reduce, reuse, recycle goes in that order. That's called a hierarchy. The first one is what we want to do first. So we want to reduce the amount of stuff that we create and waste. And then if we do create waste, we want to reuse it. And then lastly, we want to recycle. So we have a campaign. This is actually an international campaign that's called Choose to Reuse. For example, one of the things I do is I bring a reusable coffee cup with me every day. I have not gotten a coffee cup from anybody in I probably a good 5 years. I bring my own bags. I bring my own water bottle. That's something probably everybody listening to this can relate to. You go to a soccer game, a softball game, a baseball game, and there's 25 water bottles on the bench. Nobody has their name on it. So halfway through drinking it, you don't know, is that mine? Is that yours? And they all get left behind. So just buy your own, bring your own, put your name on it, and go plastic free. This is a campaign, especially who doesn't love a turtle. Last year we did Plastic Free July, and we tried to really encourage everybody to go plastic free just for a month. So you don't have to, if you don't want to, but just start small, pick one item, whether it's your water bottle or a grocery bag. And like I said, I go out to dinner almost every weekend with a group of friends, and I always bring Tupperware with me for my leftovers. And they all kind of made fun of me. And last weekend, they surprised me and they brought their own. So start small and make a ripple effect like a wave, and it'll catch on. And it's not that hard.
yeah, you don't have to completely reinvent your whole entire world, but if you take one step, it could be positive and
Yeah,
obviously
exactly.
impact others, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a fan of like putting food in styrofoam.
Yeah.
And we're the band, New Jersey's band actually covers styrofoam as well. Um, the the glitch with that is there's not a lot of stuff that is as suitable as styrofoam. So that deadline is a little bit pending, but these are things you need to think about because there's going to be a time soon in New Jersey that you're not going to be given all this disposable material and plastics.
So what can the students do to help, um, the environment?
And there's so many things that we talked about. Um, at school, it's pretty easy. You're gonna, if you're in school or when you're in school, make sure you recycle, make sure you recycle right. We talked before about doing the book recycling bin. That's available. That's something you can host at the school and you can actually even make money. So it's a great fundraiser, and all you have to do is put a bin in the parking lot. You can even do a plastic bag recycling collection program. We have a lot of schools in Union County that are doing that. And once they save up enough bags, they actually get a bench for their school.
Nice.
Um, my personal favorite, besides the reusing or reducing, is don't litter. And maybe, the Township of Clark has litter cleanups, and you could even do one at your school if you were so inclined. It's a fun activity now that we're allowed to gather outside in greater numbers. It's a good time to enjoy the weather with all your friends and do something good.
Those are great ideas.
And we don't want to forget when you go home, you learn what you learn at school, but we want you to go home and teach this to your parents, because we all know who's the boss, right? So you got to tell them to recycle right, go plastic free. It really is freeing. Bring your own bags, use a reusable water bottle or coffee cup. And especially now, this is something, because of COVID, we really haven't dealt with that much before. But when you order out, tell them you don't want all the extra stuff. You don't need, if you're ordering to your home, you already have silverware, you have napkins, you have straws, you have ketchup. You don't need all of that. You just need to tell them just the food, nothing else required. It saves them money, and it saves you from having to throw it all away and be wasteful.
I'm surprised there's not an opt-in for that, like there is or will be for other aspects like straws.
Yeah, and I think we're going to be getting there. That's conversations we're going to be having with grocery stores,
Mhm.
because it ultimately will save them money down the road. But we certainly don't want people getting mad at the grocery stores or other retail stores because they're not getting
Right.
the bags. It's not their fault, but so we just need to be prepared.
Yeah. These are all great examples. I know we're closing out our time here, so I really appreciate your time, Joanne. I know the kids are going to appreciate it. I learned a ton, and just how I can course correct my own recycling habits. I thought I was being helpful. So appreciate your time and just the additional information about what's available in our county and what the future looks like in the state of New Jersey and what we can do to help.
I'm glad that you invited me, and it was really a pleasure. So I will leave you with our new state logo. Bag up, NJ. So make sure, if you do nothing else, make sure you start buying some reusable grocery bags and stocking up for next May.
Great. Well, thank you again, Joanne, for all your time. And I know you're busy with trying to launch that campaign. So thank you for taking the time for us and St. John's.
Oh, my pleasure.
Thanks so much.